And what is going on, everyone? My name is Johnny Roses, Community Manager at Bethesda, Australia and New Zealand. And I'm here with John Johannes, Game Designer at Tango Gameworks. John, how you going, mate?
Hello, everyone.
Everyone in the chat is saying hello, John.
Everyone in the chat, yeah. hello.
We both have all the chat up right now, so we can see exactly what you're saying to everyone that is going to donate if you are. So we are going to be talking about all things Evil Within today, John. So for those of you that don't know, John is a game designer at Tango Gameworks, and you are also director on the Evil Within 2. Is that correct?
That is correct, yes.
Yeah. So we're going to talk about, the first game, the second game, like the development of them. I essentially want to try and take everyone on a journey of you first joining Tango Gameworks, how you got started on the Evil Within, and then just kind of work forward until we get to Evil Within 2. And in the background, I will be playing just like some really early gameplay level of Evil Within 2, just as some, sort of background. But we're going to be talking about everything, the first game and the second game. So chat, are you ready to go? Are you very, very excited to talk about all things Evil Within? Are you all good? The chat's going crazy right now, John.
Yes.
Everyone's like, yeah, let's do it. Now, before we get started, John, I believe that you have something to say to any Japanese fans of Evil Within that are watching us right now, right?
Yes, there may be a few of you. So, 日本の、ファンが今見てるんだったら、ちょっと頑張ってちょっと英語でやるんですけど、英語が分かる人だったら、頑張って聞いてて、いろんなサイコブレイクの、開発ストーリーについて語りますから、どうぞ、楽しんで聞いてください。
Awesome. Thank you, John.
Okay.
And I still love that it's called Psycho Break in Japan. So let's swap to the gameplay for the Evil Within 2. I'm going to unpause my screen and let's jump to the gameplay. So as I mentioned, John, I kind of want to start very, very early on in your career at Tango Gameworks. So when did you join? How long ago was it? Because from my understanding, you've been there for 10 years now, right? It's been a long time.
Actually, I literally just got an email from the company reminding me that it is my 10th anniversary.
I did it. Company. I got it right. I did my research.
Yes. So I was there, from the beginning, and worked on Evil Within 1 for the entire development cycle.
Yeah.
From the Evil Within 1, we were kind of, a lot of people were in charge of different levels.
Yep.
And I was in charge of, if people remember the original game, it was Chapter 9 and Chapter 10. Chapter 9 was the mansion level where you're kind of chased by Ruvik through the mansion. And then Chapter 10 was sort of it's kind of like we call it like a boss gauntlet because it was just kind of like nonstop, traps and then two bosses right after another. And it was kind of meant to be this kind of like midway climax of the game. And
right.
So I was in charge of those levels.
That's pretty awesome, man. So what was it like just being able to work on, because at that stage, the Evil Within was like a brand new IP, original IP. Is that correct?
Yes. And any new IP, it goes through tons of different, trying to find its place of what it wants to be. So
for sure,
even the final versions that end up in the game, they were probably the fourth or fifth time they were those levels were redesigned and things like that. So it's constantly an iterative process where you're seeing stuff and you're playing it, and then when other things change, you got to change it again. And so a new IP is always very, very difficult. But I think the team who made Evil Within, we're all very happy with how it turned out in that sense. And
for sure.
And we can talk about it later, but there were a lot of things that kind of we wanted to do, but they didn't fit in, and we tried to actually work that into the sequel, which we can get into later. But
for sure. Does that include the first person mode, out of curiosity?
No. I
So
mean, there are
you
some
didn't want to
sections
do
of the first game that
person.
had first person. I mean, we played around with that, but it was from the beginning. It was a third person experience. We kind of wanted to keep that. So
fair enough. All right. So and before we kind of really get into the development, what made you want to join Tango Gameworks in the first place?
So actually, when I joined the studio, they had not announced any game. They didn't announce even what type of game they were making. It wasn't even called Tango at that point. It was called the Shinji Mikami project or something like that.
Oh, really? I didn't know that. That's awesome.
So yeah, it's like, yeah, we didn't even have a name yet. And I always, I grew up on Mikami-san's games, and especially the games he produced, because I always loved the kind of the out there ones. He produced lots of games when he was at Capcom, things like Ace Attorney and things like that. And there's just like a wide spectrum of things he's done. So, I've always kind of known him as that sort of creator,
right?
Not just, the guy who made Resident Evil. So
for sure.
I was just kind of excited to what can be done. I had no game experience whatsoever. So I joined the studio basically saying, hey, I have no experience, but I've always been a huge fan, and I just want to help out, to make it as good as whatever we're making, to make it as good as possible.
So how did that conversation go? Because like originally you would tell me that you were from the US, and obviously Tango and Shinji being in Japan. So how did that transition work to you working over there?
So I was in Japan. I was actually doing the JET program, which some Japanese students may know is kind of like a way to essentially kind of teach English or help English education in Japan.
Right.
So I lived in the countryside for 2 years, and I just studied Japanese like all the time. And as I was kind of figuring out what I wanted to do next, I basically ran into that website that was advertising his new studio, and it was the only thing I applied for. Is just like a weird chance of, well, let me see if I can get a job in the game industry or something like that.
Right.
And I wouldn't say randomly, but I got hired. And then I was like, well, I'll probably get fired in about 3 months, because I realized I don't. So it was me freaking out for 3 months, but it was such a cool experience, working with. At that point, it was about only 20 people, but we were kind of just throwing ideas around, and so everyone was kind of involved in the game making process. So I kind of quickly pivoted to being in the game design team, because I was kind of very involved in those chats, and I was very passionate about game design and what I thought was cool.
For sure.
And so that's how it kind of began. It's a lot of people say, like, how do you get into the game industry? And for me, it was just I applied. It was very it was very strange. There's lots of different ways to do it, and I think every tale is unique, but that's how I was able to do it.
Oh, for sure. I mean, like, whenever someone asks that question, there's a million and one answers that you can give, because everyone has a slightly different story, right? But that's is essentially why I wanted to ask you that, because you would have your own story, and you had no experience, and you're jumping in, and you're working with the team there at Tango now, and obviously you're a much bigger studio now, from that the small humble beginnings of 20 people. So let's get into like the first Evil Within. So like what did you want to create when you first started developing that game, and as it was being made? What exactly were you trying to achieve, gameplay wise, story wise, thematic wise, with the Evil Within one?
Well, the kind of the direction that we were giving from Mikami-san was that sort of it was advertised was like a return to survival horror. And what we kind of learned through making the game was, because there's been so many iterations of survival horror throughout the generations.
For sure.
Like, the original Resident Evil, and then, kind of the action-focused ones of Resident Evil 4.
Yeah.
And regardless of what they were, internally, they were all considered that sort of survival horror, which is just the definition was, there is a fear, but you have the ability to fight back.
Yeah.
So a lot of people, I know when the first game came out, they were kind of like, this isn't survival horror because you get all these guns and things like that, and you're kind of strong. And it's like, well, the original Resident Evil, it's like you were an elite team of like, soldiers, but
sure,
you were trapped in a mansion.
Yeah.
So to us, that was that was never kind of an issue. It was more about creating tense situations where you were vulnerable, but you could fight back. Mm-hmm. I think one of the things that came away that we kind of maybe pushed too hard was these sort of like, at least with the first game, was kind of like instant kill mechanics. It was
right.
If people remember playing the first game, there were a lot of instances where you would just kind of get suddenly caught up and killed in various traps and or bosses that would just grab you and kill you.
Yeah.
But that was kind of our sort of strong arm approach of being like, okay, this is a very aggressive and dangerous world.
For sure.
But yeah, so kind of each, like I mentioned before, everyone had their own stages when we were making the first game, and each one kind of had a different theme. But they all kind of took a very long time to develop. I know a lot of people like that first stage in the beginning of the game in the village where you're kind of there's the chainsaw enemy like hooked up into the farm.
Yeah.
The barn, and you have to sort of fight him in the village. And that was probably like the longest developed thing that we made. It was kind of a lot of sort of like free roaming stuff, which actually influenced the majority of the Evil Within 2, because that's kind of what we wanted to do. We wanted to have a lot of sort of open-ended, gameplay ideas that you can explore while figuring stuff out. But it kind of scaled down, as we were kind of making it. There was some tech limitations at the time and things like that. But overall, I think that was like a kind of like a prototype of essentially what we really wanted to do with the Evil Within. And then it kind of it slimmed down to be a little bit more sort of linear in patterns. I think out of the 2 levels that I did, I think I wanted the mansion level to be more about the sort of exploration aspect,
right? And
then the next one to be more of like a linear, torture chamber or something like that. So we kind of went back and forth a little bit like that. But yeah, we kind of played around with the lots of thematic horror elements, or like things that people remember from when they think of survival horror, like a kind of a grab bag of some of those ideas as we were making the first game. And for better or for worse, it came out as I think a little bit what's like the word? It's like not really like as a full package. Like it kind of felt like every level was different. And so that's something when we came into the sequel, that was something actually we wanted to make a little bit different. And that was kind of like an overall directional decision where it's like, let's make it sort of thematically similar throughout the entire game instead of kind of jumping back and forth like that.
Yeah.
But I think that has pluses and minuses. So a lot of people like that about the first game, that it was kind of like a roller coaster ride of like every situation was different, which I definitely agree that's a cool aspect of it. Yeah.
So you mentioned that that's one of the things that you wanted to change from the first to the second game. Is there anything else in particular that, that in between Evil Within 1 and 2 that you look back on and thought, this is what we should be changing, this is what we should be doing for the second Evil Within?
Well, a lot of the stuff had to do with the story aspects as well.
Right.
And again, I definitely can see that there are a lot of fans of like both methods. Like the first game was very, very obtuse, and and a lot of people, when they finished, even people on our dev team at the end, they're like, I don't know what happened, It's kind of funny. But we're like, okay, that was not the goal, for you to finish the game and not really know what happened. But after that, we made the DLCs for the game, which were actually planned after the majority of the completion of the main game. So it's not like we kind of left those out on purpose, so you would have to like buy it to get the story. It was something we realized. It's like, okay, maybe we weren't getting our point across as it was intended. So we wanted to create this original story that did kind of fill in those blanks that some people were maybe missing. As well as create like a cool, new, interesting story to go along with it. And so with the Evil Within 2, it was definitely kind of like a discussion early on. It's like, well, let's make the kind of the situations and the sort of motivations of the player character like much more kind of understandable. It doesn't need to be so mysterious that you're like, I have no idea what's going on. You should be able to at least understand the basis of what's going on. And there should be, obviously, the world of the Evil Within is kind of bizarre because it's like all inside the mind. So there's these supernatural and surreal things. But you should be able to at least follow the sort of the general thread of what's going on. So that's when we decided to focus on, just Sebastian as a character, rather than the first game was like from the lens of almost like the villain. You're sort of watching, you're almost like seeing how he's being tortured over and over again, as opposed to the opposite way.
So, DLC on the first Evil Within game.